I don't know that the game's any different so much as that these kids are just so much more skillful today. You know, they're so much quicker, they're faster, they can jump higher, they can run fast. I mean, everything physically. An average player today, if you could ever take an average player today and put him back when I played, he'd be one of the top players in the country, if not,
Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to B-Ball Breakdown. I want to share with you today a fascinating interview I did with longtime John Wooden assistant Jerry Norman. He came to the staff just at the dawn of their dynasty and had a lot to do with turning their program around. Pay particular attention to the section he talks about Pete Newell in the middle, because Pete Newell is my idol and the guy who I hold higher than anybody else in coaching. So listen to how his effect was on the UCLA basketball program, because it's pretty fascinating and almost startling.
To me, basketball is a game of mathematics where you're trying to create situations whereby there's the percentage probabilities that are advantageous to your team versus your opponent. And if you can do that enough times over the course of a game, in a very close game, it's probably going to make the difference in the game. Most of the coaches, they were physical education teachers. They really weren't coaches. They weren't trained as coaches. They didn't understand how to plan a practice. You know, it's kind of like roll the ball out and you guys go ahead and run up and down the floor and play, for an hour and a half, and practice is over and we're going to play somebody tomorrow. So you don't learn anything, you just get out there and play. Most of your players that you find that have been successful have spent hours out in the backyard of their yard shooting at a basket, or they go to the playground, they shoot at the playground, and you play because you get repetition is how you eventually be able to react instinctively and not worry about what you got to do. You just do it because you've done it so many times. The players that wanted to really improve themselves or enjoyed playing would come out in the afternoon, play on the outdoor courts, because the gym was being used by the gymnastics team or the wrestling team or somebody inside. You couldn't use the gym in the spring. Mm-hmm. It's a different environment, totally different than today. And there was no strategy. You just, you execute the fundamentals. You execute the offense, that whatever offense you're playing was the triangle or the high post or whatever. That's the way they played. And there wasn't any strategy involved in it. So, like everything in life, there's the evolution in it. There's the change, and it's usually going to come from somebody that's already on the outside, so to speak, or coming into the profession at a time with different ideas, which is that's where I was. So we had to actually implement some of the things, a few of the basic principles that Newell did, except that we're a running team. We're not a walk the ball. What we needed to do was the opposite of what Newell was doing. He wanted to slow the game up. We wanted to speed the game up. So you had to create some ideas of how to do that. Newell already had ideas how to stop it, but he wasn't interested in speeding the game up. We were. I don't know Pete Newell personally very well, but I think he was one of the early coaches that did the very beginning of what I would consider what I'd say is some kind of strategy in basketball, which was non-existent. And he was successful doing it. When I coached the freshmen, we'd play the preliminary game, and then the varsity would play afterwards. I'm watching UCLA play Stanford and Cal and SC and watching the other schools. And I don't know the players on our team versus theirs and watching them play, but it was pretty impressive watching. I would say to myself, which team would I rather have the talent? What's the talent difference between Cal and UCLA? I couldn't tell any difference. To me, they were about the same. But we weren't winning. Cal was winning 12, 13 points every game. So there's a reason for that. So you're looking behind it a little bit and saying, what's the reason? Newell was a very, very good coach. Maybe the greatest coach of all in basketball, at least in my era and times. The two things that I noticed that was the beginning of what you could call a strategy. One was he understood tempo, and he controlled the tempo of the game and make the other team play the way you want to play. And he was very successful at that. And secondly, UCLA never ran a step against them. And secondly, he was a very, very good defensive coach, and I think he started doing some things defensively that you didn't see before. And maybe one of them, which would be relatively simple, but it's really effective, but you never saw it. You're guarding your coach tells you, hey, this guy you're guarding can really go to the right. I want you to be really be aware that he's really strong driving to his right. And it doesn't make any difference because Poppy's going to get by you anyway. Okay, he gives you, like Sharman used to give this guy a head fake, and he's gone to the right. Everybody knows that's where he's going to go, but okay. So Newell was smart enough to figure out they're just going to make that move anyway, right? So he moved the defensive player over on the guy's right hand. So instead of playing directly between him and the basket, he would take his foot and split him with his right foot, get his other foot outside of his right. So that way it made it a little easier for the defensive player and harder for the offensive guy to get around to his right. In other words, he'd force you to go somewhere you didn't really want to go, or wouldn't allow you to go where you wanted to go. Fundamentally, players can only do, they can either pass the ball to somebody else, they can shoot the ball, they can drive and shoot the ball right or left, or they can shoot an outside shot. That's their options. Very few players can do all three of them. So you take away the ones that are the strongest. That was Newell's very smart move. That's the first things I noticed. But when you add those up in the course of a game, it makes a big difference in the outcome. There was the Northern Division and the Southern Division in those days because of travel. You know, air travel was in the early stages. In the early 50s, you're flying 2-engine planes, or you're taking the train. The teams in the North played in one part of the conference. We played in the southern part. And then the winners would play a 2-out-of-3 championship, and they'd alternate the site of it. It wasn't like playing one game in Seattle, one in LA, and one in Seattle. It was all three in Seattle or all three in LA. You had to win the conference to qualify. As late as 1960, 1970, 70 or 71, you know, USC went 24-2 and probably had the second, or maybe you're the best team in the country. You don't know. They lost twice to UCLA, couldn't get in the tournament. They didn't take you. In the late 50s, Pete Newell was coaching at California, and they won the national championship in 1959. And in 1960, he played in the finals again. So we got the national champions in our conference. So obviously, we're not the dominant team in the conference. So our program wasn't any better than Stanford or SC, or certainly Cal. And so we lost a lot of players that we were interested in because, you know, we couldn't say our basketball program was any stronger. And then academically, Cal's a very good school. Stanford's a great school. And SC has a different kind of appeal. You know, they're a very, very good school. So it's a real process. I mean, the players that you recruited, even though they may not have been the best players, you give them a scholarship to play and whatever. But we weren't getting the very best players in the area here. Well, I don't think that Coach Wooden didn't want the better players. I mean, he'd like to have the better players, but you got to actively go out and recruit them because there's too many other schools that, you know, make the impression they want them to go there more than you do. So why do you want to go somewhere where the coach doesn't show you that much interest? I mean, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So by just spending time and evaluating the players that we did want to recruit, and then spending the time trying to show them why it'd be the best thing for them to come to UCLA, that was the basis. Hazard was the first player who really was a major impact player. Back at that time, you know, there's a civil rights movement. The majority of the schools in the country, you know, didn't recruit black players. And so his opportunities were much more limited than what they would be today. And one of our former players, Willie Knowles, was playing in the Pro League at that time, and Willie got to know Walton and thought he was a really, you know, very, very good player, and he's looking to try and, you know, go to school somewhere. And he was a sophomore, and on the freshman team we had Gail Goodrich, who was the LA City Player of the Year, and Freddie Goss, who was the CIF Player of the Year. And at that time, Freddie Goss was considered a substantially better player than Gail. And Gail was like I was, in the sense that even though he had achieved as City Player of the Year, he's 5'11" and 150 pounds or something. So Goodrich, unbelievable instinct for the game. Know where to be on the floor, how to get there, what to do, how to set players up. I mean, things you can't teach players. They either have it or they don't have it. And Gail had it. He was really, really great player. A lot of teams who walked the ball up the floor, that's probably what most of the teams did at that time. And I think probably one of the things that Wooden was successful with was try to not walk the ball up the floor, try and push the ball up the floor. And so a lot of teams we played weren't used to playing against that. So if you can do anything that's different that they're not used to playing against, it's usually an advantage. We won the regionals in 1962, And we had 3 seniors and 2 sophomores. We had Slaughter and Hazard as sophomores, and Gary Cunningham, Johnny Green, and Pete Blackman graduated. We have Freddie Goss and Gail Goodrich coming up with the freshman team. Jack Hirsch, who was out of junior college, was going to be playing. And we had a good team. We won the conference, and we played in the regionals. But the problem was that all of our teams in our conference walked the ball up the floor, and we fooled ourselves into thinking we're running, but we're really not running, and we're more getting mesmerized and playing the same way they are. We just played a little better than they did and won the conference. We get into the tournament, we play a really good running team. They run us off the floor. We lost, pretty substantially in the first round of the tournament that year.
To
Arizona State. So prior to the next season, I talked to Coach Wooden about, we've got some really skilled players coming back. We don't have any size. We got a lot of really good players. So we got to create an offense that's advantageous to us and advantageous to the type players we have and disadvantageous to our opponents. So we needed to force the other teams to play all over the floor. We let them inbound the ball, and they'd always take the ball and put it on the floor. And they usually try and drive to the right because they're right-handed. Goodrich would either stop him by himself or with the help of Slaughter. And now the guy's got to force to pass the ball somewhere. And they're worried about the other teams thinking we're playing. What helped us a lot was the fact that there was no strategy in those days. So therefore the coaches didn't understand when something was used against them. They didn't know what it was and really what it was. So most of them thought we were pressing to try and steal the ball. They all thought if they didn't turn the ball over during the game, they were really successful. We didn't care where they turned the ball over. We just wanted them to get up and down the floor. If you could spread the court, height doesn't mean anything. And athletic skill and ability to move and get around the floor and smart know what to do, which is the kind of players we had, and Jack Hirsch and Erickson and Goodrich. We had some players that were really, really smart, and they had the agility to execute that kind of a defense. Well, I would say he was a little more organized, not a lot, but a little bit more organized than my junior college coach. And he had a lot more knowledge in terms of how to play offense, not so much defense, but offense. And ran a different kind of an offense in the sense that was playing a high post offense where almost everybody used a low post offense. Wooden was not real big about stopping the practice as much and making a lot of corrections. He would stop it and make one when he thought it was important, but he'd rather have you getting repetitions and doing it, as long as you're doing it right. He'd rather have you get the repetitions from it, which is, very effective.